Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 191. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my Masters of the Universe Origins figures, Wave 7. So I have previously reviewed the other 6 waves, as well as a couple other odds and ends, such as some of the deluxe figures and some of the Masters of the WWE Universe, kind of like crossover figures. But recently, I have acquired both Wave 7 and 8 of the standard Masters of the Universe line. And so I'm going to review 7 right now, and I'll be back to shoot another video very soon to cover Wave 8. So before I dive right into the toys, I just want to give you a quick little bit of background on some technical changes I'm experimenting with. I don't know if it's going to make any difference or not. I usually shoot all these videos on an iPad, and it's an iPad I've had for 4 years or so. And one thing that I've always struggled with the iPad is it's too large to for any of the like the stands that are readily available. Like, you get these little arms that can hold up your phone and stuff. I'm pretty sure they do make tripods and stuff for the iPad, but the 2 that I have around the house, they don't fit the iPad. So I always just kind of prop the iPad up, and because of the way it's propped up, I'm always shooting at an angle where the camera's kind of looking up at me. So, that's not my favorite angle. Usually somebody that's got a little extra chin, that's not their best angle. But that's what I've had to work with for the last, 290 episodes. So that's what I've done. Now, the thing is, I had an iPhone that I purchased in July 2020, and it recently broke. And that was very frustrating because it was working perfectly fine. I've never dropped that phone. I don't fill it full of videos or pictures or anything like that. I pretty much just keep it in my pocket for texting. And anyway, I got a little message that said, I needed to do the new update. So I said, update now. And it basically bricked my phone. I took it to the Apple store, and the geniuses took a look at it, and they said, yeah, your phone is toast. The software update must have been too difficult for your hardware to run. Anyway, it all sounded like bullshit, but I had to go out and buy a brand new iPhone 13 that I otherwise would not have gone out and bought. Anyway, all that is to say that my iPhone 13 has a better camera than my iPad. I'm more comfortable shooting on my iPad because it's got a large screen, and usually when I'm talking to you, I'm looking at the whole screen so I can see what I'm shooting. So if I'm holding something up to the camera, like buzz off here, I can hold it up and I can see if I'm holding it too high or too low. I know exactly where to look because I'm watching what I'm doing on the screen. However, when I shoot and edit these videos, they always look like they're pretty high quality, even on my iPad, which doesn't shoot in 4K. I think I was shooting in 1080p maybe, but it looked good when I was editing it. And I don't often go back and watch my own videos once I post them. But I recently had looked at some of my old videos, and I realized how grainy and, just they're not very good quality when they get uploaded to YouTube. So I've been trying to find ways to maybe improve that. And I think one of the ways to do that is to shoot 4K video. Now there's still, I don't pretend to know how this all works, but I think YouTube, just because I shoot it in 4K, they're not still going to necessarily display it in 4K. I think the more popular channels kind of get prioritized, and small channels like my own, they don't necessarily give me the same, the same speed or quality or whatever you want to call it. So maybe this won't make a difference at all. But anyway, I was not about to go out and buy a new iPad just to slightly improve the quality of my videos. But since I was forced to buy a new iPhone, I thought, well, maybe I'll try and shoot this on my iPhone. And now, mind you, I could still do it the same way I had always done it, where I can see the screen. Mind you, it would be smaller on an iPhone than it would be on the iPad, but I could still sort of see what I was doing. But on my little bit of research I did regarding the quality of videos, I learned that the back-facing camera usually is of a much higher quality than the selfie cam, which is basically what I'm using when I'm looking at the screen shooting my video. So for the first time ever, I'm shooting this video on a phone instead of a tablet, and I'm also doing it by talking to the back of the phone. So all I'm really seeing right now is this glaring light in my eyes instead of looking at the screen that I am normally seeing when I'm talking to you. So I don't know what this will result in. Maybe it'll be a better quality video. I hope so. but maybe not. Maybe it'll look the same. And if it looks the same, I'm probably going to go right back to using my iPad, because not only do I like the fact that I can see better on the iPad, but I find it's just easier to edit and stuff when I have a bigger screen to work with. So all that is to say, I hope this works. I hope it looks good. If it doesn't, you won't even know the difference, and all of this was a waste of your time. But that's just, if you notice things are a little different, like the angle's a little different, I probably have to work this out a little better. Like maybe I'm too low on the screen, maybe I'm too high, I don't know, maybe I should pull back a little bit more, zoom in a little bit more. If this works quality-wise, I'm sure I'll try and perfect this over the next couple episodes on camera placement and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, I hope this looks better than my previous videos. You probably don't care one way or the other. You just want to hear about these Masters of the Universe figures. And there's some pretty cool ones in this wave. So why don't we jump right into that? So the first of the 4 Wave 7 figures that we're going to take a look at is Stratos. Now we have already received a Stratos in the Origins line, which was very closely based on the vintage Stratos toy. This one here, it's the exact same figure, but in pretty different colors. So you might be wondering, well, why does he have this new color scheme? Is it just something that Mattel came up with out of the blue? And the answer is no. This is Stratos' look from the original Mini-Comics. So when the Masters of the Universe toys first started coming out in the early 80s, they came packaged with these little comic books that told the backstory of these characters. And now these were put out before the cartoon. So where the cartoon was pretty childish and the character designs were pretty locked in by that point, when they were making these comic books, clearly the character designs and the colors weren't all locked in, because quite a few of the characters look pretty different in those early mini-comic appearances, and Stratos was one of them. So even though the Stratos we all are pretty used to had a kind of a gray body, this one here has got a flesh tone body. So he basically looks like a hairy naked guy wearing some wings and a jetpack. So these new figures here, the Origins figures, like the vintage figures they're based on, they also come with Mini-Comics, and they feature the characters of that wave. So right now I'm showing you the 4 figures from Wave 7. All 4 of those figures came with the same Mini-Comic, and this is it right here. So you see Jitsu, who's like the one villain in this line, is featured prominently on the cover, and the characters are all featured inside. So the other characters we're going to talk about are the Sorceress, Buzz-Off, Stratos here, and then Jitsu being the villain in the wave. Now what's interesting about the mini-comic is you see that they still have Stratos here in his standard colors, which is the gray and blue, rather than the flesh tone. Like, they didn't color him this way for the mini-comic that came packaged with him. But anyway, it is a throwback to that old mini-comic from the 80s. And I think it's a pretty weird look. Stratos was one of my favorite Masters of the Universe figures when I was a kid. I unfortunately don't have my vintage Stratos anymore, but I do have the previously released Origins figure, which looks a lot like the vintage Stratos. And here he is, just for comparison's sake. And this looks pretty much identical to the toy I had when I was a kid. That's what these Origins figures are all about. The only thing is they have increased articulation. So where the old Masters of the Universe figures, they basically swiveled at the waist, their arms could move forward and backwards, and their heads could turn, and that was it. With these new figures, they have like ankle articulation, and they have a boot cut articulation. They have knees, they can move back. They have elbows, they have wrists. So a lot more stuff there. Their heads can look up and down. But otherwise, as far as the looks go, this looks pretty much like the Stratos that I had as a kid. This is the look that Stratos had in the cartoon. This is the look that Stratos would have had in pretty much any other merchandising that you might have come across. And this is basically the look he has had in every version of Masters of the Universe that have come since the 80s. So yeah, this is not a very well-known look for Stratos, but I think it's kind of neat. It's kind of fun. It's definitely, I think it's weirder than this one. This is just what I'm used to. So, you know, Stratos is a weird character because he lives in a city in the sky, and he's kind of like presented as like a Birdman character. But you'll notice he looks kind of simian. Like, his face, to me, looks a little more monkey-like. It's not like he has a beak. You know, like, it just looks like kind of a monkey face with a beard. and he looks hairy. He doesn't look like he's covered in feathers. And in fact, like these feathers here, like these are on his harness, and his wings, they detach. Like they're not attached to him, so they're not biological wings. And even, he has the ability to fly, but he's got a jetpack, which can be removed. So it kind of makes you wonder, is this guy really a bird man at all? He doesn't have feathers, he doesn't have a beak, he can't fly without the use of, strap-on wings and a jetpack. He's just a weird character. And now he looks even weirder with the fact that he looks like a naked human guy. And also the feet are weird. Like a lot of creature characters, like we'll see later with like Buzz-Off, for example, had like kind of clawed feet, or a lot of characters had boots. But Stratos has got these weird like sock feet. It's just strange because judging by the color of them, both versions, you'd think, okay, this guy has bare feet, but he has like no toes. It's just very strange design on this guy. But I still like him, and I like both versions of this figure. So as far as accessories go, what you see is what you get. He came with the mini comic, he came with the wings, and he came with the jetpack, and all that stuff was basically attached to him in package. So there's really not much else to talk about package wise. Before we move on to another character, we can just do a couple of, I guess, comparisons. So this here is basically what the vintage toy looked like. So that I had that as a kid, but then I got rid of it. But then Masters of the Universe kind of had their first revival in 2002 with a new cartoon and a new toy line. So I have the 2002 Stratos figure here, and I really like this guy a lot. Like you can see how faithful that design is to the vintage figure, except they just kind of cranked everything up. Like his wings here are much more impressive. He actually has toes, which make a lot more sense. And overall the design's cool. His jetpack is kind of a little bit more enhanced and everything, but a pretty cool design. I like this guy quite a bit. And then we get the Masters of the Universe Classics line, which began in late 2008, early 2009, in which case they gave us toys based on the vintage toy line, but they tried to make them bigger, better, more articulated. So this here is the Stratos from the Origins line. And as you can see, he shares a lot of the same design elements as the other two Stratoses that I have here. He's got the same colors, but he is taller. He's got more articulation. He's a nice figure, and I like this guy quite a lot. And when I was buying these these classics figures, I kind of thought that was the pinnacle of He-Man. They took the toys I had as a kid, but they made them bigger, better, more detailed. I thought that was great, and I thought those would be the last He-Man figures I would ever need to buy. But here I am buying a new line in the Origins. There's something just kind of fun and classic. All these terms get a little mixed up because these are the classics. Here I am saying that the Origins line is classic. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. These toys they're affordable, they're fun, and it makes it much easier for me to collect color variants like this, because Mattel actually made a previous version of the Mini-Comic Stratos in the Classics line. So that was the first time we ever got Mini-Comic Stratos, except he was in a Comic-Con exclusive 3-pack, and it was about $200. So it was, it was very pricey, and you kind of really had to weigh like, okay, I like Stratos, but these are like, I think, worse colors. And even though it's kind of neat to have, am I really going to shell out $200 to get a weirder looking Stratos? And for me, the answer was no, although I would have liked to have had it. But now with the Origins line, they made the Mini-Comic Stratos a regular release, available at retail. They've gone up a little bit since they first came out, but they still range from about 15 to 20 bucks Canadian, which is still like the cheapest action figures you're going to find out there. And I think he's a lot of fun, and it's kind of nice to build up my Stratos army a little bit. So yeah, if you could only have one Stratos in your collection, I'd go with this guy as far as the Origins line goes. But if you kind of like to expand your Masters of the Universe line from the kind of the standard fare, then yeah, I definitely think Mini-Comic Stratos is a fun addition. So the next figure we're going to talk about is the Sorceress. Now, like Stratos, we have already received a Sorceress figure in the line, so I guess you could call this Sorceress version 2. This is a nice figure. Before I get into it, I do just want to mention, I talked a little bit about this in my intro, but I am using a new setup. I'm filming this on my phone in hopes of getting some better quality, But by using my phone, I've got it propped up on a little arm here, so it's not as stable as when I usually have my iPad kind of stationary on the desk. It might allow for me to get some more creative angles, but it also creates a little bit of confusion with my light setup here. It's a little harder for me to reach around and get to the figures. So I apologize if things get like knocked around a little bit, or if the lighting tends to come in and out. Again, this is kind of an experimental episode, and hopefully everything works out. But please, if you have watched past videos and you're watching this one and you do see an improved quality in there, please let me know in the comments below that you're seeing it, or if you've got suggestions on what I should be doing differently. I'm all ears, because I'd like to make the best quality videos for you guys. Anyway, so here's the Sorceress. She's a pretty classic character. She's the one that gives He-Man his powers, essentially. She lives in Castle Grayskull. You kind of need her. And the first Sorceress figure in the Origins line actually came packaged with Castle Grayskull. So for a lot of people, they might not have wanted to buy Castle Grayskull. It takes up a lot of space. It was kind of expensive. So it's nice that they did a recolored Sorceress and made her available single-carded, so that people that didn't necessarily want to buy the castle could still get their hands on the Sorceress. Now, I did not have a vintage Sorceress figure. Me and my brother Doug, we had a decent little collection of Masters of the Universe toys when we were kids, but probably combined, I think we had at most 20 figures, probably less. So there was a lot of characters that we were missing, and the Sorceress was one of them. But I always liked the look of the Sorceress. She's, this bird design she's got a bird cowl on her head. She's got these feathery wings. This is more, at least she's not pretending to be a bird. Stratos is kind of a little different, because Stratos is basically about as bird-like as the Sorceress is, in that he's just kind of wearing feathers and stuff. But at least the Sorceress, I'd say, is pretty clearly a human character, just kind of dressed up as a bird. Although I do believe that she could actually transform into a bird in the cartoons. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I didn't have the vintage Sorceress. There I go, banging the lights around a little bit. So the first Sorceress figure I was able to get in my collection was from the 2002 line. Now, you saw the Stratos I had. So the 2002 figures were a little bigger, a little more detailed. And Stratos looked pretty faithful to the vintage, the classic. Again, it's hard to use these lingo, the classic Stratos, But with the Sorceress, they gave her a pretty radical redesign. So here is the 2002 Sorceress. And this isn't actually an action figure. This is a statue, what they called a staction figure, because, here's the 2002 Stratos again. So you see, he's very clearly an action figure. He's got joints for elbows, his arms move, his head turns, all that sort of stuff. So they made a line of action figures in 2002, but then the show got canceled and the toy line got canceled. But Mattel and the designers who sculpted these toys, the Four Horsemen, they didn't want to necessarily stop making the toys before they had finished making all the characters they wanted to make. So they found a workaround, and they decided to make a line of statues that fit in line with the action figures. So you see, if you were posing these characters together, they're in scale to one another. She looks a little bit taller, but that's because she's sculpted on the stand to make it look like she's hovering. But that was the idea behind these staction figures. So anyway, she was somebody that got a pretty radical redesign in the 2002 show. You can see she's got this much more Egyptian goddess kind of look to her. She still has the bird cowl and the feathers, but it's just a little bit more ornate this time around. So that was my first Sorceress figure. Then when the Masters of the Universe Classic line started, again around 2009, they made a Sorceress that looked like this, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get her. Some of the figures in the Classics line proved quite difficult to get because you had to order them online. They went on sale on the 15th of every month. There'd be a new figure for sale, and there was always a mad scramble. They would often sell out in a matter of hours, sometimes in a matter of minutes, and it was just difficult to get every single figure. So I have a pretty good sized classic collection, but I am missing a few. Anyway, they repainted that Sorceress figure, and they gave us this version, which they call, I think it was Temple of Darkness Sorceress. And I believe that name, Temple of Darkness, comes from the name of a particular episode of the cartoon where she dressed in all white like this. So this is back to, the classic look for the Sorceress, right out of the cartoons and stuff. So she's got, these clear, translucent wings that can kind of be spread out on her back. It's a cool look for the Sorceress, and I like that figure, but I did, it was kind of a bummer that I didn't have her in her classic blue and orange colors, which is what she was really known for. Now, fortunately, when Super 7 took over the license from Mattel and started making their Filmation line of figures, so that was specifically action figures in the classic style, but designed to look more accurate to the old Filmation cartoon. So here is Super 7's Filmation Sorceress. So again, she is like a 6-inch tall figure. She's very detailed. She's got all the articulation, but she's in the classic design, and she could now be displayed with my classics figure. So now I had her in both her white Temple of Darkness and her classic look. And actually, they did give us a new action figure based on her 2002 Egyptian design too. So I actually have 3 sorceresses from the classics collection, all with pretty different looks. All right. So anyway, back to the figure at hand. As I mentioned, this is the second version of Sorceress we get in the Origins line. The first one we get is this one here, which is based on the Temple of Darkness figure from the Classics line again. So it's the same figure, except all white. She's got those white translucent wings that can be spread out like so. And it's a nice figure. I did buy the Castle Grayskull, so I did get this figure. But just like with the Origins line, even though I got the Temple of Darkness one first, this is what I'm talking about. I don't have enough room to work. I'm trying to reach around to big light fixtures that I have shining here. So it's a little awkward. I'm going to have to work this stuff out later. But anyway, so like with the Classics line, I got the all white one first. I wanted a colorized version. Fortunately, I was able to get this later. So with this line, I got the Temple of Darkness one. I like it well enough, but I was hoping for a classic colored one, and that is what we get here in Wave 7. So it's a nice figure. I think the face is, it's a pretty face. It's a simple design. It looks like it could be the face that's painted on an 80s action figure. But, it's well done. And, the design, it's very classic with the white, the orange, and the blue. The way the wings fold up is kind of nice. On the Classics figure, the wings were a little awkward. So I think they've actually got it. They're doing it better on the Origins figure. The knees look a little bit weird. They always have on these Origins figures. They haven't quite perfected this. So when you move her knees, I don't know, you get that weird kind of flap of skin that hangs down over her knee. It's a little awkward looking, but not the end of the world. But otherwise, I think the paintwork and everything on her it's nice. It's simple. Those feathers painted on her chest. It's very kind of basic looking, but it fits with the Origins line, which are supposed to be, real throwbacks to the vintage toy line. So yeah, another successful figure. I think it is, my preferred version. So if you could only have one Sorceress, I would say go with this one. It's the more classic design. It's a little more colorful and interesting looking. But so yeah, I'm glad that we got her. And accessories wise, as you can see, she's just got her staff here. I'm sure it has a name. I don't remember what it's called, but it's got a bird design on it there, and it's just cast in solid white, which is the same thing we got with the Temple of Darkness version. Anyway, I apologize for my clumsiness here, knocking everything over, but anyway, there is the Sorceress. So the third figure we're going to talk about here is Buzz-Off, the Bee-Man. Now, sort of like Stratos. So Stratos was a bird guy. Buzz-Off is a bee guy. Except Buzz-Off is very clearly a bee guy. He's not a human trying to pretend to be a bee. And you can tell that by his design. He's got those bug eyes. He's got bug fangs. He's got antennas. He's got wings that are attached to him. He's got these clawed feet. He's got these clawed hands. He's definitely insect-like. And Buzz-Off was my favorite heroic character when I was a kid. I liked Stratos too, but I always really was drawn to the creatures, the kind of the monster characters. And so that's why Merman is my favorite all-time Masters of the Universe character. But when it comes to the heroic characters, a lot more of them were more human-like, like Tila, Man-at-Arms, Fisto. But with Buzz-Off, he basically could have been a bad guy character just in his design. And yeah, I thought he was just a great heroic character. So I really loved this guy. So much so that he's one of the few vintage figures that I actually kept from my childhood. So I can actually show you a straight comparison here. So this is the modern Origins figure. Here is the vintage Buzz-Off from like 1985 or 4, whatever it was. Anyway, so yeah, great figure. And you can see just how similar they look and what a good job the Origins line does at recreating these old figures. They're not reinventing the wheel, they're just adding the increased articulation. So now I can finally show you kind of what I was talking about articulation-wise. You see there's no knee joint, there's no ankle joint, there's no elbow, there's no wrist. It's turns at the waist, turns at the head, arms forward, backward. That's all you get. Now Buzz-Off does have a little bit of extra articulation sort of in his wings. So these you can actually take the wings off. They're just attached to that little knob there. But it's nice how they can be moved and kind of folded away, tucked under one another on the back, or you can spread them out pretty wide like that. I always thought they were kind of neat because they almost looked biomechanical. They don't necessarily look, natural wings. So almost like he had a little bit of a cybernetic aspect to him. But anyway, all that stuff carries over into the new Origins Buzz-Off. Now, of course, I can't get him to stand. Okay, so like all the design elements, such as like these spiky little bits on the side of the legs, those 3-toed feet, which are pretty grotesque, the clawed hands, which don't make any sense, really, because, well, they make sense from the standpoint of that Mattel was trying to save money because they use these same clawed hands on their crab character, Clawful. But, I don't know why a bee-man would necessarily have these crazy clawed hands otherwise. And yeah, he's got the wings work the exact same way. They can be tucked away like that, folded under one another. Weapons-wise, he has the same brown axe that the vintage one did. I'm not sure if I still have the vintage axe laying around somewhere. But here's where the one major design change comes with these figures. So you see, Buzz-Off clearly has these antennas, almost look like horns coming off the top of his head, whereas the vintage figure had antennas, but they're much more subtle. They're sculpted, kind of pushed back on his head almost. So you just get those little teeny nubs there. So that's the one design element that they kind of amped up for the new Origins figure. So for accessories, other than he came with the Mini-Comic and he came with the axe, he also came with his helmet, which Buzz-Off has always come with a helmet. It never made a whole lot of sense to me. And this is why I think, and I feel I may have read this somewhere, but don't take it as necessarily fact. I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff. But I think maybe as they were designing Buzz-Off, he was maybe going to be a little bit more human-like with bee-like armor. And so one of the elements they gave him in design was a helmet like this with big bee eyes that he could wear over his human face, which would give him like bug-like vision. But clearly, they ended up going with a full-on bee man. So it really didn't make sense that why Buzz-Off would need a helmet with bug eyes to go over top of his already bug eyes. So the vintage figure had a helmet that looked a lot like this, kind of just sat on his head like this. It didn't even really cover his eyes. I always thought it was ridiculous looking. So I don't think I have it laying around. I might, but I never made Buzz-Off wear it when I was a kid. That just went into like my spare parts bin, never to be seen again, essentially. So this guy here comes with the same helmet, except this one has holes cut out so his antennas can actually fit through it, like so. So that's kind of neat. I guess it holds it in place a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know why anybody would want to display him this way. It doesn't make a bit of sense to me, and I still think it looks completely stupid. So, just like the vintage helmet, that one is going to go in the spare parts bin and never to be seen again. So let's do a couple more comparisons here. So that's what the first, the vintage 80s Buzz-Off looked like. In 2002, like the Sorceress, Buzz-Off got a pretty radical redesign. So here is the 2002 Buzz-Off. Now his antennas here are a little warped because he's been in storage for a while. But you can see he is no longer a big beefy muscle man like the old one was. He's much more bug-like with these creepy bug legs. He looks kind of, I don't know, like a grasshopper almost. He still has the claw hands, but they look a little bit more bug-like instead of straight up crab hands like the vintage figure had. He's just overall he's just much skinnier, sleeker. His face design there, it's more bug-like. It's a lot less rounded. Anyway, really cool design. This is also the first time. Not only does he have wings on the back, but he had spaces for little extra legs. So he's got 2 little extra legs that plug in there. Very cool. And this figure also came with a much larger axe for him to hold, rather than just a little kind of hand like the hatchet that the other figures came with. So then when we got the Origins line in the 2008-2009, here is, did I say Origins? Classics is what I mean. So here's the classic Buzz-Off. So again, you can see how he takes the design elements from the classic figure. And when I say classic figure, I mean vintage figure. Very hard to keep all this straight. But, he has antennas that are very close to his head. They kind of went back to this look rather than borrow from this look. But they did keep the long axe from the 2002 line. And he also has the added little extra bug arms coming out of his back. So that's another element they kept from the 2002 design, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, a great figure. I like this one a lot. And so yeah, with this new Buzz-Off, I think they did a fantastic job in that he carries forth all the elements of the previous figures. I'm hoping that maybe Origins decides to give us a more 2002 inspired Buzz-Off later in the line, which I don't know why they wouldn't, because we've already got 2 Stratos, we've already got 2 Sorceresses, we've already got like 6 or 7 He-Man and Skeletor, and even though they haven't been released yet, Mattel has showed that they are going to do a He-Man and Skeletor based on the 2002 redesigns. So yeah, if this Origins line keeps going, I don't know why they wouldn't do more 2002 inspired designs. So yeah, I think that 2002 design could actually look really great in this little format. But yeah, it's a great figure. I love the addition of the antennas. I think that looks better than how it looked on the vintage toy. And yeah, great character. I'm excited to finally add this guy to my Origins collection. So the final Wave 7 figure that we have to review is one of Skeletor's henchmen. This is Jitsu. Now, I never had the vintage Jitsu figure. He was a pretty cool character. He's very clearly, got some Asian-inspired design, even with the name. And he was introduced in the same time as Fisto was introduced as one of the heroic warriors. So Fisto, he had a big, giant metallic fist that you could, pull his arm back and you could punch forward. And Jitsu was supposed to be Fisto's arch enemy, and he had a big golden karate chopping hand, so he'd pull his arm back and he would swing back and chop. So it was a fun design element, and I don't have the vintage figure. I never did, so I can't really do a comparison. But like all of these Origins figures, they're pretty faithful recreations of the vintage toys. So I imagine the vintage Jitsu looked pretty similar to this guy, even if I don't have him here to compare to. Now, Jitsu was kind of like the Sorceress in that he didn't make it into the 2002 toy line, but they did make a Staction figure of him. And I thought that Staction figure was awesome. It made Jitsu like really big, really stylized, and it gave his like metal chopping hand, they really blew it out of proportion and exaggerated it. And I loved that design. Unfortunately, I never saw that Jitsu Staction figure anywhere for sale, and I was never able to get it. So the first Jitsu figure, the first and only Jitsu figure that I ever owned until this guy, was the Classics version. And here he is. And I gotta tell you, Jitsu was one of my least favorite Masters of the Universe Classics figures. It just didn't really work for me. I thought the Classics had a pretty consistent design across them. They all looked like the vintage toys. But with Jitsu, I felt like with this face design, it was too detailed. Like there's just too much, furrow in his brow and everything. And then the head also just looked too small. He looked kind of pinheaded to me. So even though I think this is a good head sculpt, I don't think it works for the Classics line. And overall, this one just kind of missed the mark for me. But, you know, this was the only Jitsu I had, so it was going to have to do. Now, they did actually make an animated style Jitsu sometime later, like Filmation. Super 7 did it in their Filmation line, but again, that was a convention exclusive, so I was never able to get the Filmation style Jitsu. But yeah, here we are. This is my second ever Jitsu figure from the Origins line, and I think he's pretty great because we got Fisto a couple lines ago with his big metal fist, and he's got a sword, and now we've got Jitsu with his golden karate chopping hand, and he's got a sword. So now these two rivals can finally face off. And yeah, I love that they gave him this chrome hand, because as you might have saw with Fisto, they did not. Fisto's got a pretty like flat gray hand, but this guy here, they went with the, I don't know if it's not quite vac metal, maybe it is, I don't know how you would describe it, but it's got that kind of chromy look, that reflective look, and I think it really makes this figure pop on a shelf. I think it looks great. I really like the head sculpt. If the Classics figure had a head sculpt more like this, I think it would have been a much more successful figure. But yeah, he's really solid. I really like the colors. I really like the design of this guy. You know, his accessories are simple. He's just got the sword, but that's really all he needs. You'll notice one of the design elements they changed here is he's got this belt with this rope belt that came with the sash. That was a design element that they introduced on the 2002 Staction figure that carried over into the Classics line. He doesn't have this one here because this is based on the vintage figure, which did not have the rope belt. So yeah, he looks good. I'm happy with him. You know, this line, you know, or this wave 7, I think it's a successful wave across the board, but it is a little bit of a mixed bag because we did get two characters that were just repaints of toys we already had, which sometimes isn't as exciting. But I think at least the classic colored Sorceress was something we really needed in our Origins collection. The Mini-Comic Stratos, not so much a necessity, but the fact that I was never able to get the Classics version of Mini-Comic Stratos, I'm happy to finally be able to get it now in the Origins line. But when it comes to Buzz-Off and Jitsu, these guys are absolute must-haves for your collection. And yeah, they look great. They pose great. So yeah, what more can be said? Go out and get yourself a Jitsu. Okay, so that was my review of Masters of the Universe Origins Wave 7. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please leave me comments below. I know it's not really cool to leave comments. I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I very rarely leave comments. But since I started doing videos, I've kind of tried to get in the habit more of, even if I just write on a video, nice video, good job, just because I know how much, you know, I appreciate it when I get a comment from you guys. So I try and kind of pay that forward and comment on more people's videos. So yeah, not that I'm looking for you to just say nice job, but if you did have a question or a comment, you really want to say something about these toys, I always do appreciate hearing from you guys, and I'm always pretty quick to answer back. So again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, ciao.